Hello, my dear friends, and welcome to Lead to Gold. This is the podcast devoted to discussing all things growth and wellness. And we are here for episode 55. I'm so excited to have you. Yeah, I have a lot to talk about today. Can't wait to share. And before we get into the episode, I will give the spiel that I always give, that most podcasters always give. If you don't already know this, Lead to Gold is not just a podcast. It is also a blog. So if you like today's conversation, maybe this is brand new to you, I want to extra welcome you in and say thank you so much for listening, for giving it a chance. If you like it, I also have a lot more content in the form of writing. I know Substack has been a big thing lately. I've even had some personal friends tell me that they prefer to get their content lately more in the form of writing. I think that idea is going to tie into what we're talking about today. But anyway, if you like that kind of thing, I'm actually not really on Substack, but I do have my own website. It is leadtogold.blog. The link is in the show notes if you want to get a little bit more of this kind of conversation in that form. In addition to that, if you want to keep up with what I'm up to, with what is going to be coming out, the best way to do that, the way to kind of know firsthand what's coming out, get the first look at everything, is through my monthly newsletter. And this is so near and dear to me. I put a lot of work into it to make it super cute and fun and interactive. I share lots of extra little goodies there, including an exclusive playlist for every astrological season that I'm sending it out in. So if you're listening to this kind of right as the episode is coming out in mid-February and you want to sign up, you will be right on time to receive the Pisces newsletter and the Pisces playlist. And I love Pisces season, so I'm going to make it like really ooey gooey and fun and sweet and cute. But that is all yours, and I only send it out once a month. Beyond that, other ways to support me. I sell my art on my website as well. I like to do paintings of cute little whimsical scenes, animals, things like that. So if you like the sorts of things we talk about, if you like whimsical little scenes, you're probably going to like my art. And I'd like to think it's quite affordable. So if you want to support me, that's the most direct way to do so. And I would greatly appreciate it. Every dollar helps, truly. If that is not something you are able to do, that's okay. You can also rate the podcast wherever you're currently listening to it. You can absolutely share it with a friend. And that also just helps the show grow, get more viewership, get more listeners. And I would love that. I want more people to have access to this. So in general, whatever you can do, I'm just happy you're here. So thank you so much. And that's my spiel. Let's get into the episode itself. Not to also do the thing that a lot of podcasters do, but I do think today's conversation requires me to give a little bit of where I've been the past couple of weeks and what is currently taking place in my life, because as are most of these episodes, this is very hyper relevant and something that I want to chat about because I'm experiencing it, and I think a lot of us in different ways are experiencing it. So I do think I actually talked a little bit about this in my last episode. The idea that February is kind of a slow month. That is generally, I think, how it goes, especially for me. But if you're in the northern hemisphere, right, it's winter, it's kind of midwinter. So there's not a lot usually going on at this point in the year. This is what my mom loves to call her like February funk, because we're all just kind of stagnant, not doing a lot and stuck at home, whatever it may be. But this year has been quite different. This year, February has been booked and busy, and I don't think I've ever been this busy in the middle of winter before in my entire life. Not complaining at all. It's been really fun, but very different, right? I looked at my monthly view calendar at the beginning of this month, like once I had kind of finished writing out everything that I had already had planned. And every single weekend day in February is booked. Every single one. I'm recording this on Valentine's Day, and I'm actually, my husband and I intentionally are not doing a whole lot today because everything else is so busy. But then Valentine's Day in and of itself is kind of a day that needs to be blocked off. So regardless, we're still kind of like doing a thing today, even though we're not really leaving the house much. Anyway, it's just shocking to me that this has happened because this is not normally the time. It feels kind of out of alignment, you know? And the problem with it is, and I could have maybe guessed that something like this was going to happen, right? So I'm recording this on Valentine's Day. I don't know if I already said that. And we're halfway through the month, completely, officially. I got so sick earlier this week. If I go back about, a week from today, 8 days ago, whatever, Friday, I had a watch party of the opening ceremony. I went to a friend's house for that. We also rewatched Heated Rivalry. I'm not going to shut up about it. Sorry. Saturday, I drove an hour and a half with my husband down the state to visit my parents and my brother and sister-in-law, which was a super cute, just like, it was so cold and frigid, but it was such a cute little like outing day. So we had a blast. And then came home, took a nap, went back out and went to a Dead Mouse show in the city. And at one point I looked down at my phone, and now mind you, it's Super Bowl Sunday because we were there way, way, way into the night. I looked down at my phone. It's 2:30 in the morning. I was like, we need to go. I'm not built for this. We need to go home. And we had a great time, but I just was like, it is way too late, and we are still, if we straight up like got in a car and drove from that moment, it still would have taken us an hour to get home. But no, we had friends that we were with. We had to take the bus back to my friend's house. We had to get some things that we left there. We then dropped another 2 friends off at their houses, and then we drove home. So we ended up getting home closer to like 5 a.m. And then Sunday was kind of a wash for like the morning, early afternoon. And then it was Super Bowl Sunday. So we went and hung out with friends for the Super Bowl, and we stayed for the whole thing. I was so tired, but thankfully I have wonderful, amazing friends who don't care. You know, we're not like party mode. We're just going to like hang out and watch the Bad Bunny concert, right? So that was great. But then Monday, you know, I went to work, did the thing, ate dinner, woke up on Tuesday and was like, oh no. Oh, no. We're not going to work today. It's already not happening. It's a wash. And I and my husband both had the worst stomach bug I think I've had in actually genuinely like 20 years. I don't think I've been that sick stomach flu vibe wise since I was a child. It was so awful. So all day Tuesday, I was incapacitated. My husband somehow went to work for a few hours. He really probably shouldn't have done that, but he did. While I like literally could not get out of bed except to like pry myself into the bathtub, and I needed warmth, so I sat there for a while. And then I laid on the couch, and then I got up, and then I went back to my bed, and that was all I did that entire day. I did not eat. I did not go downstairs. I was dead to the world. Like, sitting up was a struggle. All of that to say, this is a lesson in knowing your limits, friends. This is a lesson in knowing your limits. I would be lying to you if I said, you know, that was Tuesday was the worst of it. It's now Saturday. I'm still not 100%. You know, I'm not. I really still haven't had like a genuinely good meal, but I have had more events to go to. I saw a movie Wednesday evening, which was great. I saw another movie with my colleagues yesterday, which was great. I have had these plans in particular for months. So fabulous. We did it. We've done the plans. I was also supposed to go back out to the city to a friend's housewarming party, but by Friday morning, I knew myself and I said, no. I'm not doing this. I can't do this. I love this friend so dearly. I feel terrible about not being able to go, but like I physically can't. I came home from this movie yesterday. I tried to like chill out with my cats for a little bit, watch a YouTube video, but my eyes were shutting. So I was like, okay, well, that's my signal to call it a day. And we did. But now we're halfway through the month, still got a lot of things planned. What do we do? What do we do? This is the thing. I have been so excited to have a full calendar, even at a time where it feels kind of unnatural to have that. But at the same time, and I don't even want to say that it's because I'm too old or that like my body can't handle it anymore. I don't necessarily think that's the case, but we got to know our limits. And now, because I went so hard for 2 weeks, felt the consequences, literally forcefully had to stop everything. I was so sick on Tuesday, I could not even go on social media. I think I posted about that the other day, but it's true. Like the thought of looking at my phone made me want to throw up. Not that I was already like not doing that, you know? Sorry. Anyway, I couldn't keep up with the pace that I had set. And now that I'm kind of over that and recovering from that, I feel kind of behind. I feel kind of like, damn, this has been a little bit of a struggle to get back up on my feet. And I have kind of been chronically having that feeling in different ways for a while now, long before February. So this is kind of where I want to get into the thesis, if you will, of what we're talking about today, which is just that it is wonderful to have social obligations. I am in no way saying that that's a bad thing or that we need to like chill out and only say yes to selective things. I am a socialite and I am proud to say that. I'm happy to say that. My husband and I both feel that way. We love our friends. We want to show up for everything. And I also take pride in the fact that we are not a flaky group of people. If I say yes to something, I will be there. And it sucks and it feels terrible on the rare occasions that I do actually have to back up and be like, my body can't do this. I'm so sorry. But that's where we've kind of been, right? And the point of it is that there is a very weird and difficult balancing act that I think we have to do in today's demanding culture of like productivity all the time, peak performance all the time, going to everything, doing everything all the time, perfectly, whatever. I think there's a balance here that we need to figure out, because I personally am the type of person that if I can't do it all, I start to slide into, okay, well, I'm just going to do nothing. I want to talk about how to potentially resolve that. And this is not coming from a perspective of, I have figured this out. I'm currently working on it and I'm learning things, and I would like to share them with people who are feeling stuck in a similar cycle. So let's start with the culture of constant motion, because we do absolutely, undeniably have this invisible social pressure on us. And it's not something that we talk about as often as general productivity. The thing I think is so over discussed to the point where it's more of a cliche than it is a good, interesting talking point is the case of being constantly overly productive with work. That is what we tend to think about when we're talking about doing too much. And I actually just talked about that as an entire trope in my previous podcast episode, which was, I think it was called Your Greatest Desire is Often Your Deepest Wound. So if you want more on that specific conversation, listen to episode 54. But what is not often talked about, and what I think has a little bit more nuance to it, is the discussion of being almost overly productive in your social life. And for me, this is a little bit hard to talk about because, like I just said, I do not flake. It's kind of a moral obligation for me that I'm going to show up for my friends. If they want me to be somewhere, I'm going to be there. But I think there can be a case for sometimes you really do need to back off and realize when you yourself need to take a rest. This, I have cognitive dissonance as I'm talking about it because I don't like the idea of doing that. But I do think that social obligations can sometimes be a fault of our own mental and physical health. Just to put it in perspective, though, I want to just paint a picture of what social obligations look like at the age that I am currently at. So if you are anywhere around the age of 28, you're probably expected to go to frequent dinners, birthdays, get like weekend trips, concerts, gatherings, any sort of like networking opportunities for your job, meeting with people for hobbies, doing side projects, staying culturally relevant. That in and of itself can kind of be a social obligation, like having to show that you are doing things, having to show that you have a life outside of work or outside of your home. Consuming can also sometimes be a little bit of a social obligation because what are you going to talk about at the next social event if you haven't been keeping up with the shows or the books or the podcasts that your friends have been recommending to you? All of these are social obligations, and that's just a tiny list. But they are all things that are expected of a person who is part of a community. And again, this is not inherently bad. It's just a lot. So this becomes something that can also quickly burn us out if we are trying to do too much. That's a harder conversation to have because I know in my own cultural zeitgeist, it's like community is everything. We're trying to reclaim that. We're trying to get less individualistic. We're trying to get more out of our homes and into the lives of people around us. So what I'm saying right now is inherently counterintuitive to that. What I'm not saying is that you shouldn't do any of this stuff. What I am saying is sometimes we need to find balance. It is very hard to feel okay about rejecting social opportunities, but life is just faster now, and we see more of it from other people, or at least we see what they want us to see. So it feels like it's natural, but deep down when we spend time with the body, we know it's not. So all of this makes me question and wonder, what were people doing before the social media-ification of social obligation? Because social events have always existed. People have always been social. Duh, that's how we survived as a species. That is the structural pillar of what it is to be human, right? But before it necessarily looked a certain way, before we had these weird windows into other people's lives and we were seeing how it was supposed to look, how the engagement parties were supposed to look, how the bachelorette weekends were supposed to look, how going to a concert with your friends and having coordinating outfits, and even just the meta posting about those things. Before we saw what it looked like to do these things, I think there was a level of genuineness that we have kind of since lost. And there was a level of not really caring what it looked like because nobody had this weird secret window into other people's lives like we do now. I think I have a little bit too much of a black and white way of thinking about what people do with their free time in today's day and age. Because to me, and I know that this is not accurate, again, black and white thinking, but to me, you either have the kind of life that I do, which is like you are trying to fill every single moment with something. If I'm not working, I'm with friends. If I'm not working or with friends, I'm cleaning my house, or I'm eating, I'm cooking a meal, I'm sleeping. every moment of my day is intentionally filled with something. Maybe intentional isn't the right word, but every moment of my day is filled with something, because I do have a little bit of that overproductiveness need in me, and it is uncomfortable for me to be still and do nothing. But the other side of that, in my perspective, is if you're not like me, you are somebody who works and then does nothing. But when I say do nothing, I mean you are on your phone, or you're watching Netflix, or you're consuming something. You work and then you consume, versus you work and then you have social obligation. I know that that is not true, and I know that there is a large amount of people, I'm sure, I hope, who have a good, healthy balance of all of this, and then more, which we'll get into. But in my own brain, that's how it works. And I think the reason is because I myself don't know what to do with myself when, let's say, I'm sick and I can't socialize. I am forced to do nothing. I kept saying to my husband that night when we were both really down bad, what do I do? Because I was tired of watching TV. That was the only thing that I had energy to do that day. And even then, I was still kind of only half watching and then half falling asleep and half staring at the ceiling, because it was too difficult. But I kept being like, what do I do? What do I do with myself? Where do I put my body? How do I get comfortable? This is so uncomfortable. I hate just sitting here. I hate having to just sit and lay here. Similar tangent. I have a huge, huge fear of ever being physically disabled, because I don't know what I would do with myself. I feel like I would be trapped. Even just for one day, I felt trapped in my body. It was awful. So I bring this up to say, I think it's kind of my own neuroses that gives me this black and white thinking about what people do with their free time. It's a very all or nothing approach. It's a very all or nothing mindset. And I think it's going to be crucial moving forward for me and for any of us who either live on one or the other side of the spectrum to learn some sort of balance, because otherwise we are doomed to repeat that all or nothing cycle. I also, for a moment here, just want to bring up the most recent blog post that I did, which doesn't have an insanely strong tie-in to what we're talking about right now, but there's a little bit of a connection here that I just want to pull on. The blog post is called Living Seasonally on Purpose. I'll put it in the show notes if you want to read the whole thing. And it's more about what it says, living seasonally. But there's some moments in this where I was discussing how different seasons of either the real world, like the calendar, the moving of days, those seasons can affect how we live, and also how our own internal seasons can affect how we live or how we show up in the world. I'm going to share a few excerpts that kind of help paint a better picture of this and see if we can make a connection here. So when you start to pay attention to your own internal seasons, what tends to trigger burnout versus motivation, fatigue versus sustained energy, the hermit mode versus FOMO, you're likely to begin to notice patterns. It's very rarely random, but the modern lifestyle of working for the weekend and keeping at the same pace all the time stifles our ability to feel much below the surface. Here's the thing. Our culture, and often our own psyche, demands constant peak performance. But a peak implies that there is a workup to the top and a descent back down. Without that structure, it's simply a plateau. Even more so, we're not able to function at that high point all the time, especially in the winter. Eventually, we will fall back down. But whether it's a timely realization to pump the brakes or a full-blown crash out is entirely within our ability to control, so long as we can recognize the signs of the season. So then I go on to talk about what the different seasons look like. And again, this could be external seasons or internal seasons, which I won't get into. I've done plenty of writing and podcasting about that. But in general, understanding where we're at and how we feel, and that's literally like levels of exhaustion. It could be as simple as that. That's a good starting point to try to figure out what the body needs as far as social obligation or leisure time or complete total downtime. Now, I don't think that this is some sort of lost art that people used to just know what the seasons were and know what their bodies were meant to do in those seasons. I actually would be more inclined to think that today's kind of, I don't even want to call it woo-woo, but you know what I mean, like the new age kind of zeitgeist brings this idea together. And it's a good idea. I think there's a lot of truth to it. I don't think that humans alive in generations before us really thought of it in that way. I just think it sort of naturally happened in that way. And what I mean by it is living in accordance with the seasons. When it was winter, you had to expend all of your energy to stay warm / like feed your family, right? So it makes sense that people weren't doing as much in the winter because they literally needed to use their energy to stay alive for other things. Versus in the summer, people are working more. People are more social because the weather's nicer. You can be awake longer because there's more light. This is a very natural consequence. I just don't think it's a conversation that people have always had because they didn't necessarily need to have it. We have denaturalized ourselves enough to the point where now we do need to have the conversation because we need to be reminded that seasons still matter. The way we live, canonically, largely, collectively, does not need seasons, right? We all work a 9 to 5. We all follow a 24-hour day. We all follow a weekly schedule. We know that 5 days out of that 7-day week are dedicated for a very specific purpose. And we must fulfill that obligation in order to make money and sustain ourselves. That's a much larger conversation that we don't have time to get into right now. But the point is, seasons largely become obsolete in a world that expects us to do the same things at a specific time every single day or every day of the work week. When we're only left with 2 days, maybe 2.5, to have free time, this is where this comes into more of a close-up. This is where we have to remember what our bodies are capable of, what they need, what they're craving, what we're craving less of, what we need to get rid of. There's not a lot of room or time to do that, especially when for so many reasons productivity is being even more prioritized, even more shoved down our throats, even more of a daunting expectation on every single one of us. We must be productive, and in order to be productive, we must be at our highest point all the time, which is not sustainable and not possible. Go read Living Seasonally on Purpose if you want more of that part of this conversation. But before we saw how everybody else, quote unquote, does it, before we had these weird windows into other people's lives, before we saw what a perfect life looked like, before we had the image of, quote unquote, that girl on Instagram, or the girl bosses, or the people who just had it all together all the time and lived a perfect life. Before we had the expectation, we still had some level of social obligation, but autonomy in how we did it. It didn't have to look a necessary certain way, but some of the common things that people would do as they gather would be to like sit on their porch and watch the traffic, have a coffee, have a conversation in their individual alone time. It wasn't a shameful thing to reread a book, right? Nowadays we have Goodreads where you're supposed to say however many books you're going to read in a year and read 37 books just for the sake of reading them. People wrote letters to each other. People had smaller social circles. So maybe you're talking to the same 5 people repeatedly. Maybe you're calling your grandma on the telephone twice a week. People went on walks with no stimulation. There was just, I'm going to go for a walk with my dog. People obviously still do that, but it's become more of an obligation than it has ever been. It's not so much I'm following a whim that I want to go on a walk right now. It's just I have to walk my dog, so I'm going to walk my dog. I have to get my body moving, so I'm going to put my AirPods in and listen to the new album that I've been wanting to listen to. Again, I don't even want to say that there's anything wrong with that. It's just different. And it's all coming back to the idea that so much of what we do today is meant to fill some sort of void because we're not allowed to be still. We're not allowed to be at rest. We're not allowed to linger. We're not allowed to just be. We have to constantly produce or do something. And this is a total cliche, I know, but I'm thinking right now of the quote, "You're not a human doing, you're a human being." And that's almost like it's cute to say that, but we don't actually actively live that way. And because we don't live that way, life becomes more of an all or nothing. It becomes, I must do until I can't, until I literally physically cannot, until I am so sick that sitting up is difficult, until I am so tired that I have to back out of something that I was really excited to go to because my body simply can't take it. So we've come full circle now to a lot of different things. I know I pulled on a lot of threads here, but to bring it all back to center, living fast all the time is not sustainable. No matter how much we genuinely want to do it, we cannot. We can't. It just doesn't work. It's not sustainable. So I know in this conversation, I have kind of been pointing more toward the person who really does go and do all the time. But this also applies to the people who are a little bit more on the introverted side. The people who I said earlier, you go to work and then you consume. This is still a conversation for those people. This is still a conversation to the people who are constantly absorbing information, constantly consuming, constantly having different influences, seeing different people do different things, watching how the world supposedly operates. This is not natural. This is not the way. And our body, as always, keeps the score here. If we know within ourselves, whether it's physical or mental, that we are exhausted, that we are having to force ourselves to get away from whatever the overstimulating thing is, if we are having to withdraw from things that we would normally be engaged in, it's not failure, but it is really important information. The body is going to measure fullness in a lot of different ways. And this is a new conversation for me too, because I honestly have a difficult time reading my own nervous system, again, until I am forced to shut up and listen when I'm really sick. But it's really important to start being able to tune in to different parts of the body that often show us what's going on a deeper level. How quickly are you able to process emotions, for example? If you spend an entire day stewing about something, you're pissed off about something, but you don't really know what it is, you just spend all day mad about some mysterious thing, that's probably a sign that you need to slow down in some way. If you're not getting good sleep, if you're not digesting food well, if you're easily overstimulated or easily irritated, if recovering from social events takes longer. All of these are signs that something needs to shift, because either you're putting too much on your own plate or people in your life are expecting too much of you. There's too much going on. Those are all ways to very subtly, and it's hard, I know, but those are all signals to kind of look out for. Even though the current sort of like collectivism culture will say it's great and wonderful no matter what to gather with your community, it totally is. Again, very nuanced conversation. I'm not saying don't do that. But it's not about the number of events you attend. That's not what's actually going to make you feel better about your life. That's not what is going to make your life ultimately fulfilling. And I know that's counterintuitive, especially if you are in the sort of culture or collective online that is telling you community is everything. You need to be with your people all the time. No, you don't. You actually really shouldn't. I'm going to say it again. The number of events that you attend, the number of things that you say yes to, the number of sources of information that you allow into your life are not what make your life valuable. What makes your life valuable and full is how you feel. What makes your life full is the ability to, yes, do quite a lot of that, to, yes, keep a rich community, but also sleep well, have good digestion, feel good in your body, have sustained energy to continue to see those people and do those things and take in the information, to be able to process your emotions in a healthy way, to be able to not feel socially drained. And there's only really one way to do that, and it's by kind of sort of limiting your social interactions. Sometimes you need a rest, and then you can come back. I think ultimately we will need to redefine what a full life actually is, because right now we have a very specific view of it, and that view is the social mediaification of it. We have a very specific understanding of what a full life looks like on the internet. And if you ask me, I also did a recent episode about 2016. I still think a lot of that 2016 influencer influence is hanging around, because when I think immediately and not deeply about what a full life looks like, I think of hot, skinny girls on the beach, super tan, who get to go on endless vacations and go to beautiful restaurants, and they just always look beautiful and they always look minimal makeup and like they're having fun. I think of Dua Lipa, okay? If you want the quote unquote full life Instagram, look at Dua Lipa's Instagram. That's what I'm talking about. But the stuff that makes a life actually full isn't Instagrammable. It isn't something that you can necessarily show off, because you can't photograph a deep friendship. You certainly can't photograph a deep friendship that is with somebody you don't see often. I can say confidently, to this day, some of my best friends are people that I don't see for years at a time, but they are no less important to me than the friends that I see once a week or multiple times a week. It's not as aesthetic to take photos of dancing to a YouTube music video in somebody's living room than it is to take pictures at a concert before the show starts or after the show ends. It's not something that you can really discuss online to reread a book that you've read 30 times already, that other people don't necessarily like or have anything to say about. It's not as easy to pull that one off the shelf and have things to share about it because nobody's listening and nobody cares. It's certainly not postable or shareable to take a walk and not have your phone with you. There's nothing to prove to the world because you can't record anything when you don't have a device to do so. There is nothing glamorous about having an unscheduled weekend where you spend the entire day in your pajamas and you slowly clean your house and you play with your cats. You can't show that off in any real way. So this is what I'm talking about. And I really don't even like to bring it back to the idea that all of it has to be or has had to be postable, because I don't live my life in that way anyway, and I know a lot of people don't. I'm not living my entire life so that I can post about it. I'm not hanging out with my friends so that I can prove that I have friends. You know, that's not what I'm getting at here. But that is the culture that we live in, and that is the way that a lot of people do kind of live their lives. I'm not stereotyping. I'm just pointing out the sort of expectation that has been put on all of us. And that is not what equivalates to a full life. So what I want to end us with here are just some considerations, some things to think about if you have heard this whole conversation and you're wondering where you're at in it. I know I went in a lot of directions, but I hope it's kind of come around full circle. In general, just some things to think about, some signs that your life is full, but maybe moving a little bit too fast. Maybe there's a way that we can slow it down to enrich the fullness of it. So some things, and these are several things that I've experienced just in the last few weeks, that you are canceling things you actually really wanted to attend, i.e. my friend's housewarming party. I really wanted to go, but my body was like, hell no, girl, you're not going. Absolutely not. Fun things feel like obligations. Looking at that full 30-day, or I guess 28-day February calendar and being like, holy shit, I have 17 things planned in a span of 28 days. That's crazy. And now it feels more like an obligation than things that I'm like fully, wholeheartedly excited to go to. Another sign is that you feel like you're always recovering from the weekend. That sure as shit isn't fun, right? I've always heard the trope that like, oh, I need a vacation from my vacation. It's the same sort of thing here. You need to rest after your weekend when, of course, you're not really going to be able to rest because now you have to go back to work. Here's another one. You consume experiences faster than you process them. What I mean by that is that you are more focused on the visual aspect or the recording of the event than you are on actually enjoying the event. If you're needing to prove to some mysterious online audience that you did things rather than just like being excited that you did things, that might be something to evaluate a bit. Like, oh, I didn't get a good enough picture, or like, oh, I missed this moment that I really should have gotten so I could share it. Those sorts of things. Here's the last one, kind of similar, but also just something to consider. If your camera roll has memories that you don't, like if you look back through your camera roll and are like, I don't even remember when this was. I don't even know what I was doing or who I was with. Like, where did this happen? If you have that sort of thing going on, that might also be a signal to shift how you're experiencing the social obligations. Is it an obligation? Is it something you actually want to go to? Because if in a few weeks you don't even remember where you were or what you were doing or who you were with, that might tell you a different story. All in all, just some things to think about, and absolutely no judgment either way. Like I have said from the beginning of this episode, this is definitely something I'm moving through too. And I don't really have an immediate answer for how to find that ultimate balance. What I will say is that we can listen to our bodies, and part of the Living Seasonally blog post that I mentioned a little bit ago was me doing that as well. I've really started trying to take the initiative on understanding my actual like menstrual cycle, because that can be a really big tie-in to the seasonal living as well. And I have always had a really hard time doing that. My nervous system is not close to me. I hate to say it, but it feels very true to say it that way. It's hard to know unless I get really, 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 really quiet and really, 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 really present. And that's hard in today's world, which is why we're having this conversation. So, all in all, I hope this was helpful. I hope it gave you something to think about. And if it did, or if you're maybe thinking about somebody who could use this, please share it with them. I really would love to extend the conversation. My DMs on Instagram are always open. So if you have thoughts, if you have things you want to share, please do. I love nothing more than to hear your thoughts after episodes come out, after blog posts come out. I want to know your thoughts. So please share them with me. And without further ado, we'll end up today's episode with our usual game of We're Not Really Strangers. Healing edition. We are back to the healing one. I've been using forgiveness, but the expansion pack is the healing edition for today. So let's pick our card and we'll discuss. Ooh, okay. I have never gotten this question before. I like this. How has your mental health affected your romantic relationships, if at all? All right. Well, I have a lot to say about this, so I'll try to keep it brief, but I just got married a couple months ago, and we have been dating had been, I guess, dating for 14 years before that. So I'm going to say mental health has been huge in this relationship because we literally grew up together. But in general, I was very secretive about my darker feelings for a very, very long time, because I always looked at my husband as somebody who was just kind of like happy-go-lucky and somebody who I didn't want to burden, because I'm like, well, he's just so happy and like he doesn't really have any cares or worries and he just like goes about life and is always good and steady. So I don't want to A, bring him down, and B, make him worry about me. So when things were really bad in the beginning, he didn't know. I never told him anything. I never really told anybody anything, but that's besides the point. Like, that should be the person that you feel like you can come to. And it's not that I didn't trust him. I just was like, I don't want to burden you and I don't want to make you worry. So you don't get to know that part of me. But here's a little story time. In 2019, when I was, I think, kind of on the other side of like the worst mental health episodes I'd had up to that point, I knew that it was time for me to just bite the bullet and go on medication, which I really was avoiding for a long time and did not want to do. But, had a coming to Jesus with myself and was like, okay, I need to do this. But because it was 2019, we had already been together for a long time and we were both graduating college. So we were really moving into the stage where we were going to start spending more of our lives together, like low-key living with each other, being with each other more often. It was very serious at that point. It was very like life partner at that point. I knew that I was going to have to tell him, like, I need to go on medication. And it sounds so stupid probably to a lot of people, but I was absolutely terrified, because that to me was the moment where he could just decide like, no, this is too much. Like, I don't want to deal with somebody who's mentally ill. I don't want to be in this relationship. So it was so scary, but I did tell him, and probably surprising to nobody, it went over completely fine. It was fine. I think maybe initially it was a little bit of a shock to him, just because like we literally had never talked about my mental health like that, but it was fine. And he trusted me and everything was okay. And like, it made me a lot better. So in the long run, it was a good thing to do. And I was proud of myself for being able to have him be a part of the conversation and not be ashamed of it. I was initially, but then, I very quickly learned that I didn't have to be. So that was really nice. And since then, I've been able to be a lot more honest about how things are going with me. And like, he knew that I was going to therapy when I was, and that, it's again, probably sounds like a really small step, but in the beginning of my really, really living with him, that was huge. That was huge. So things are great now. I have been very mentally stable and not dealing with crazy OCD stuff for a long time now. And I know that that could change. And I know that if it does, I can talk to him about it. So that's the very long answer. But in general, yeah, mental health has had a pretty big part in my romantic partnership. And it should. So, moral of the story, don't be afraid to talk to people about it, because if they're a good person, they'll stick with you. It's really not a burden. You're not a burden. Yeah? Okay. That's that. How about you? How has your mental health affected your romantic relationships, if at all? And how are you going to live a fuller life today? Think about that as you carry on with your day. And thank you so much for being a part of mine. I love you so much. Thank you for being here, and I will see you so soon. Remember, if you sign up for my newsletter, I will be sending out the Pisces email and playlist within the next week or so. So if you want to hear from me pretty soon after this, that would be a good way to do so. And you'll get a nice little extra treat. All right. I love you so much. Have a lovely day, and we'll talk soon. Bye.